Stop for a second and look around. Look at your smartphone, at the double-glazed windows, at the concrete boxes we live in. From childhood, they've drilled into our heads one simple and seemingly logical idea: that the history of humanity is a straight line leading strictly upward. From a primitive digging stick to the steam engine, then to the nuclear reactor and artificial intelligence. We've been convinced that we are the crown of creation, the most advanced civilization ever to set foot on this planet. But what if I tell you that's a lie? What if this straight line of progress is just a screen, hiding from us the gigantic chasm of degradation into which we plummeted several centuries ago? You've been deceived. We've all been deceived. Official history textbooks hide the inconvenient truth that can't be explained by chance or the luck of ancient masters. Ask yourself one simple question that makes any modern engineer's hands tremble. Why is it that we, with supercomputers, lasers, and the ability to split the atom, still can't replicate what bearded blacksmiths did in the 12th century in dirty workshops, as historians call them? We're not talking about magic, but pure physics and chemistry at a level surpassing our modern knowledge. Let's talk about Damascus steel. We're told fairy tales that the secret of its strength lay in a special forging method where the metal was folded hundreds of times. Historians nod their heads and talk about layers, but in 2006, a group of scientists from Dresden University took a sample of a genuine 17th century Damascus saber and placed it under an electron microscope. What they saw there should have turned all of materials science upside down, but they preferred to quickly forget about it. Inside the metal's structure, carbon nanotubes were discovered. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Carbon nanotubes are a material we only learned to synthesize at the end of the 20th century in sterile laboratories using the most complex equipment and colossal energy expenditures. Official science immediately found an excuse. They claimed it happened by accident. Supposedly, ancient masters just added certain types of organics to the crucible, leaves or bark, and it just so happened that when they burned, nanostructures formed. Do you believe in such luck? To accidentally create a material that surpasses steel in strength by tens of times and has incredible flexibility? It's like accidentally assembling a working smartphone by dropping a box of radio parts from the 10th floor. Creating nanotubes requires the most precise temperature regimes, catalysts, and an understanding of molecular chemistry at a level that only became available to us yesterday. This means that those who forged these blades possessed knowledge of matter's structure that we're only beginning to rediscover. This isn't craftsmanship. This is high technology disguised as manual labor. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's come down from the heavens to earth, or more precisely, into the water. Roman concrete. You've surely seen modern buildings that start cracking and crumbling already after 30 or 50 years from construction. The rebar rusts, the cement crumbles. Now look at the breakwaters and port structures of ancient Rome. They've been standing in salty seawater for 2,000 years already. And the most terrifying thing for modern builders is that these structures only get stronger over time. How is this possible? For a long time, we've been told that the Romans just luckily mixed volcanic ash with lime. But recent analyses showed that a most complex chemical reaction occurs in the composition of Roman concrete. Seawater, penetrating the pores of the concrete, dissolves the volcanic glass and triggers the crystallization of a rare mineral, aluminum tobermorite. These crystals grow inside the concrete like a living organism, strengthening its structure and healing cracks. In fact, ancient engineers created a self-healing material that uses an aggressive environment for its own reinforcement. We spend billions of dollars repairing bridges and dams using chemistry that fears water, while 2,000 years ago, people we call primitive used chemistry that collaborates with water. Where did they get these formulas? You can't discover that by trial and error. To understand the mechanism of tobermerite crystal growth, you need to know chemistry at the atomic level. You need to understand silicate hydration processes. Official history tells us that the Romans didn't even know zero in mathematics, didn't have microscopes, and didn't understand the periodic table of elements. But their buildings stand for millennia, while ours fall after half a century. Who is really primitive here? They're deliberately understating the development level of past eras, so we don't ask the main question. Where did this knowledge go? Why did the rupture happen? Another glaring example that academics ignore is the Lycurgus cup. This artifact, dated to the 4th century AD, is kept in the British Museum. If you look at it under normal lighting, it is opaque and has a green tint. But as soon as you place a light source inside the cup, it flares up in a bright, ruby red color. For a long time, it was thought that this was just a feature of the glass. But when physicists examined the cup in the 1950s, they were speechless. The glass contains colloidal gold and silver, but not just crumbs. The metals are ground down to nanoparticles, exactly 50 nanometers in size. That's 1,000 times smaller than a salt crystal. And the ratio of gold to silver is calibrated with mathematical precision. Changing the particle size or metal proportions even by fractions of a percent would kill this optical effect. This is called dichroism, and it is based on the plasmon resonance of electrons. To create such a thing, you don't just need to know how to melt glass. You need to know how to manipulate matter at the nanoscale. You need centrifuges, the most precise scales, and an understanding of optics that we've only acquired recently. They tell us, the master accidentally dropped a gold coin into the glass vat. That's a lie. The uniform distribution of nanoparticles throughout the entire volume of the item rules out chance. This is serial production, based on technological blueprints that were destroyed. We're not seeing art. We're seeing the remnants of the industrial power of a civilization that surpassed us in understanding material properties. And here we come to a terrifying conclusion. If they had such chemistry and such metallurgy, then they also had the corresponding energy technology. You can't produce nanoparticles and nanotubes by blowing on coals with leather bellows. For such processes, stable, high temperatures are needed. Controlled vacuum or inert environment is needed. This can't be done on a whim. That means factories existed, laboratories existed, an energy transmission system existed that we know nothing about. Or rather, that has been carefully hidden from us, replaced with fairy tales about slaves and primitive tools. Look at the polygonal masonry in Peru, or the perfectly carved basalt and granite sarcophagi in Egypt. The official version states, copper chisels and sand. But anyone who has worked with stone will tell you that you can't work granite with copper. It's softer, and sand would leave ragged, rough marks. Yet the surfaces of ancient artifacts often have mirror polishing and perfect geometry, with deviations measured in microns. In Sacsayhuaman, stones weighing hundreds of tons are fitted so precisely that you can't slip a razor blade between them. And the shape of the stones isn't rectangular, but complex, polygonal, in 3D space. To do something like that today, we need CNC machines and diamond cutters. We need cranes with enormous lifting capacity. And we're asked to believe that Indians, who didn't even know the wheel, did this? This is an insult to our intelligence. This is proof that there once existed a single global technological base on Earth, whose standards we find on all continents. Chemistry, physics, material processing, all these are links in one chain, a chain that someone broke. We live amid the ruins of a world of giants of thought. We, proud of our iPhones, can't build a road that won't fall apart in one winter, while Roman roads are still used for their intended purpose today. We've lost the secret of eternal concrete, the secret of flexible steel, the secret of processing super hard rocks. And this isn't just forgetfulness. This is artificially induced amnesia. Someone went to great lengths to erase the traces of advanced science, leaving us only pitiful crumbs and calling them cult objects or accidental masterpieces. But facts are stubborn things. Chemical analysis doesn't lie. Crystal lattice structure doesn't lie. They scream to us that history has been rewritten, and the deeper we dig, the more terrifying the picture becomes. Now that we've realized our ancestors possessed nanotechnology, let's expand the scale. Put the microscope aside and look at the world map. What you'll see there will make you doubt the mental health of official historians. We're talking about a global energy system, traces of which are scattered across all continents, from the snows of Siberia to the sands of Australia. We're talking about the so-called star forts. They tell us these are fortification structures built for defense against cannons and raids. Supposedly, such a complex geometric form, resembling a snowflake or crystal, was needed for crossfire. It sounds convincing if you don't engage logic. But look at these objects from above. There are thousands of them, and many are built in places where no wars were ever fought, in remote taiga or deserts. But the main thing isn't even that. The main thing is their flawless geometry. The walls of these forts are aligned with such precision that it's impossible without satellite-level geodetic instruments. Why such precision for repelling a cavalry attack or primitive artillery? A cannonball doesn't care whether it falls on the wall at an angle of 45 degrees or 46. But to any radio engineer, this shape will remind him of something entirely different. It's a magnetron schematic. These are waveguides. If you look at the schematics of printed circuit boards in modern devices and the plans of star forts, you'll find a frightening similarity. These structures didn't protect people. They generated, accumulated, or transmitted energy. The water by which they are often surrounded served as a conductor or accumulator. This was a single network covering the entire planet, operating on the principles of wave physics that we're only beginning to rethink. And we're told stories about muskets and bastions to hide the fact that in the 17th century, the planet was electrified, but without wires. Let's go inside the cities. Look at the cathedrals. Gothic, ancient, it doesn't matter. Official history insists these are places for prayers. Religion is an excellent screen to hide technologies. Have you ever wondered why temples have such gigantic spires covered in gold or copper? Why these domes, perfect resonators in shape? Why so much metal embedded in the stone inside? Metal frameworks, ties, floors made of cast iron slabs. These aren't temples. These are technical structures. Domes and spires are antennas for receiving atmospheric electricity. Stained glass windows using metals aren't just pretty pictures. These are filters and screens. And the organ? Do you think it's just a musical instrument? The organ pipes create the most powerful infrasound vibrations, capable of affecting a person's psyche and physical state, and possibly also structuring space or water. All past architecture is a gigantic machine. We walk through the ruins of power plants and pray to the control panel, not understanding how to turn it on. And now let's turn to what seems like boring demography and logistics. This is the area where the official lie cracks at the seams the loudest. Take any major city of the 19th century. Paris, London, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Melbourne. We're shown black and white photographs from the late 19th century. Dirty streets, horses, people in bast shoes or simple frock coats. And against this backdrop of poverty, stand cyclopean buildings of incredible beauty and complexity. Ask the question, who built this? The official population data for cities of that time is laughable. We're told that the city had 50,000 people. Of them, half are women and children. Some are elderly, nobles, merchants. Only a handful of workers remain. And this handful supposedly built millions of square feet of fired brick housing in just 20 years? Do you realize the production volume? To build one block of such houses, you need brick factories running around the clock. You need quarries. You need forests for firing. You need thousands of carts with materials that would have created endless traffic jams in the cities. Where are these factories? Where are the logistics records? Where are the bills for billions of bricks? They're gone. We're told, burly guys with axes built it. But look at the masonry quality. Joints a millimeter thick, about 1/32 of an inch. Perfect geometry. Bricks that ring like metal and don't crumble for 200 years. Today's factory brick crumbles in your hands after 30 years, and back then, by hand, they made eternal material on an industrial scale? This is mathematically impossible. With the population and technologies that historians attribute to them, building that volume of buildings in such a short time was unrealistic. It's like ants building a skyscraper. The conclusion is obvious. These cities were already standing. They were inherited from a previous civilization, far more populous and advanced. 19th century people didn't build these palaces. They dug them out, repaired them, and moved in. We are a civilization of squatters who occupied someone else's homes. And here we come to the most obvious proof, which lies literally under our feet. Buried ground floors. Walk through the center of any old city. You'll see windows sticking half out of the asphalt, doors turned into windows. Official science invented the term cultural layer. Supposedly, people for centuries didn't clear away dirt, manure, and dust, and the ground level rose 10 to 13 feet. Are you serious? Imagine not sweeping your apartment for a year. Would the floor rise 3 feet? And here we're talking about the main streets of capitals, where emperors and the wealthy lived. Did they enter their palaces through second-floor windows because they were too lazy to clear the dirt from the threshold? This is absurd. Archaeological excavations show that underground there are full-fledged floors with doors, windows, and even arches for vehicle passage. These floors weren't basements. Basements are built blind, without huge windows. Buildings stand buried several meters, 10 to 15 feet, deep in soil that resembles clay and sand in composition. This isn't a cultural layer. This is alluvial soil. Traces of a catastrophic flood or dirt falling from the sky. A global catastrophe buried cities worldwide at about the same time. And it was precisely this event that wiped from the face of the earth that very highly advanced civilization, leaving us only the tops of their buildings and fragments of knowledge. The authorities know this perfectly well. Otherwise, why, during any street reconstruction when this truth is revealed, do they quickly backfill the excavations or cover them with banners? They fear that we'll understand. We live on the graveyard of a great era. We use sewers laid by someone before us. We live in houses designed for giants. We look at maps and don't see the obvious. But if there was a catastrophe, then what caused it? And why, after it, was humanity thrown back in development by hundreds of years, forgetting even how to make simple steel? The answer to this question is even more terrifying than the catastrophe itself. If the previous facts made you doubt, then now we'll move on to what will finally destroy your faith in school textbooks. We've come to the darkest secret, which is guarded with fanatical ferocity. We're talking about Great Tartaria and the civilization wiped from the face of the earth whose place we took. Open the first edition of the Britannica Encyclopedia of 1771. Don't be lazy, find scans in the archives. There, in black and white, a huge empire is described. Great Tartaria. It occupied almost all of Eurasia, from the Urals to Alaska, and bordered Chinese Tartary. It had its own flag, its own coat of arms, its own capital, its own trade routes. It was the largest state in the world. Now open your child's history textbook. Where is it? How can you lose an empire that existed just 250 years ago? How can you erase millions of people, cities, and culture? The answer terrifies with its cynicism. This empire wasn't just conquered. It was destroyed with weapons of mass destruction, whose power is comparable to nuclear. Do you think this is nonsense? Then explain the phenomenon of the year without summer, 1816. In Europe and America, snow fell in July. Birds froze in mid-flight. Crops died. A terrible famine began. Official science mumbles about the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. But geological data doesn't confirm an ash emission of such power that would block the sun across the planet for several years. And now look at the maps of Siberia and the steppes of Kazakhstan. They are strewn with thousands of perfectly round lakes. Scientists call them karst sinkholes or meteorite traces. But meteorites don't fall in clusters, hundreds in one area, and don't leave identical craters. Any military expert will tell you that this is what the ground looks like after a carpet bombing with tactical charges. If you overlay the map of these lakes on the map of Tartary settlements from old atlases, they match. The cities were burned to the ground. The temperature was so high that sand melted, turning into glass. In the deserts of Libya and the Gobi, fields of this green glass, tektite, are still found today. Forming it requires temperatures over 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Nomads' campfires? Or a plasma strike from orbit after all? It was precisely after this catastrophe that we see a strange gap in demography and ecology. Have you ever wondered why there are no old trees in our forests? Try finding a pine or oak over 200 years old in the temperate zone. There are a handful, and each such tree is protected as a natural monument. But a forest should be varied, young, mature, old. Ours are all uniform, as if photocopied, no more than 150 to 200 years old. This means that 200 years ago, the forests completely burned out or were destroyed by a blast wave. We live in a young forest that grew on the ashes. And what happened to the people? In the mid-19th century, an inexplicable, explosive population growth begins. The graph curve shoots straight up. Historians talk about medicine and hygiene. What medicine in the 19th century? Bloodletting and dirty bandages? Antibiotics wouldn't appear for another 100 years. Why did women suddenly start giving birth to 10 children each, and all of them survived? Biologically, this is impossible without external intervention. Look at photographs of mid-19th century cities. Paris, St. Petersburg, San Francisco. Huge boulevards, majestic buildings, and absolute emptiness. Not a soul on the streets. Rare solitary figures that look out of place in these settings. Skeptics shout about long camera exposures. Supposedly people moved and blurred. But where are the blurred shadows then? Where are the traces of cart traffic? Where are the horses that can't stand still? The cities stand empty, as if they'd just been dug out, cleaned up, but not yet populated with new residents. This is the moment of the reset. The old population was destroyed by the cataclysm and war. The remaining ghost cities stood empty for several decades. Then they brought us in, or, even more terrifying, they grew us for them. Recall the huge number of orphanages and asylums that opened worldwide precisely at that time. Where did millions of orphans come from all at once? Where are their parents? Why does history remain silent about a global epidemic that killed only adults? They gave us ready-made infrastructure that we didn't build. We use canals that peasants supposedly dug with shovels. Have you seen the White Sea Canal or the Erie Canal in America? The volume of excavated soil exceeds the volume of the Great Pyramid. We're told that people with wheelbarrows did this in a couple of years. Try digging a foundation pit for a country house by hand, and you'll understand the absurdity of these claims. Without rotary excavators and heavy machinery, it's impossible. But if the official builders didn't have the technology, then the canals were built by that previous civilization. And we just cleaned them up and appropriated them. We live on a planet quarry. Look at the Grand Canyon. Officially, it's the work of the Colorado River over millions of years. But a river can't carve such even ledges and leave traces identical to those from giant rotary machines used to extract ore today. Look at the mountains in Crimea or Greenland. These aren't mountains. These are terracones, waste rock dumps after industrial extraction. All our geology is a description of garbage left by the gods after they gutted the Earth's interior. We are a civilization of scavengers inhabiting ruins. They left us scraps of technology, calling them the Industrial Revolution. The steam engine? It's a primitive remake of more complex installations that worked on atmospheric ether. We just learned to boil water using coal instead of tapping free energy from space, as the builders of cathedrals and star forts did. They switched us to paid energy. They made us pay for what was previously available to everyone by right of birth. Oil, gas, coal, this is the noose around humanity's neck, thrown by those who seized power after the catastrophe. And they panic at the thought that we might remember how it was before, that we'll find a way to turn on the ancient machines. That's why they destroy artifacts, blow up Palmyra, rebuild ancient city centers, and rewrite books. They hide the body of the murdered civilization, but the smell of decay can't be concealed. Do you feel it now? That cold, sticky feeling crawling up your spine? This isn't fear of the dark. This is fear of enlightenment. You're beginning to understand that your life, your job, your loans, and your vacation plans are the fuss of ants in a glass jar that someone put on a shelf. We've crossed the line where coincidences end and systematic control of the human herd begins. The evidence is no longer circumstantial. They scream that we weren't just deceived, we were remade. We were biologically and mentally simplified so we couldn't use the legacy of the gods. Look at ancient statues. Forget what tour guides droned on about, the genius of the sculptor. Look at Bernini's Rape of Proserpina, or Francesco Quirolo's Release from Deception. Do you see fingers pressing into marble like warm butter? Do you see the finest fisherman's net carved from a single block of stone? Official history claims this was done with a chisel and hammer. Have you ever tried striking marble with a hammer? It flakes, it cracks. Creating a veil from fragile stone that looks weightless and transparent mechanically is impossible. One wrong move, one micro crack, and years of work are ruined. This isn't carving, this is casting, or, even more likely, softening stone at the molecular level. a technology that allowed changing the state of matter, turning solid granite into putty, and then restoring its hardness. This is top-quality geopolymer concrete, the secret of which is lost. They could print houses and sculptures as easily as we print text on a printer. They mastered matter. And they left us fairy tales about great artists so we wouldn't look for the machines that made it. They made us believe in the miracle of art to hide the miracle of technology. And now lift your head even higher. Maps. Ancient maps that give modern cartographers hysterics. The Piri-Reis map, dated 1513. It depicts Antarctica, but not the icy wasteland we know. It shows a coast without ice, with rivers and mountains. Modern science learned about Antarctica's subglacial relief only in the second half of the 20th century, using seismic surveys and satellites. How did the Turkish admiral know the precise outlines of a continent hidden under miles of ice for millions of years? There's only one possible answer. Either the ice formed very recently, after that very catastrophe, or the map was drawn from orbit. And the Piri-Reis map isn't alone. There are maps by Oronce Fine and Mercator, on which Greenland is not a glacier, but a blooming archipelago. The longitude accuracy on these maps matches what we achieved only with the invention of the most precise chronometers and radio communication. Who flew over Earth 500 years ago and scanned the surface? And why did they lie to us that Antarctica was discovered in the 19th century on wooden sloops? They lie to us because Antarctica might be the key to understanding our pen, the walls of our aquarium. If there's no ice there, or if there's a passage beyond the ice wall, the entire world picture collapses. Geopolitics collapses. Resource scarcity collapses. We're approaching the main thing, the reason for all this lie. Energy. Our entire world is built on energy scarcity. We pay for light, for heat, for gasoline. The economy is hooked on oil. Now imagine that energy is free, that it can be taken straight from the air, as our ancestors did. That any cathedral is a generator, providing light and heat to the whole city without wires and meters. What happens then to corporate power? What happens to the banking system? They collapse in an instant. A person who doesn't need to survive and pay for heat becomes free. And a free person is dangerous. You can't impose loans on him. You can't order him to go to war for resources. Therefore, technologies were confiscated. Ether, as a physical concept, was banned and struck from Mendeleev's table, although Mendeleev himself placed it first under the name Newtonium. Einsteinian physics was introduced to ban superluminal speeds and energy extraction from vacuum. They drove us into the dead end of materialism, where energy is obtained only by burning something. We are a civilization of pyromaniacs. We burn coal, gas, atoms to boil water. This is the level of savages compared to those who knew how to use the planet's vibrations. Look at the chandeliers in old palaces and theaters. Huge, weighing tons, crystal structures. We're told there were candles. Can you imagine lighting 1,000 candles under the ceiling? And how to change them when they burn out in an hour? And the soot? Palaces should be black from soot. But they're clean. Because there were no candles. There were lamps running on atmospheric electricity, or mercury lamps. Traces of mercury are found everywhere in ancient ruins. Mercury is the key element of that energy technology, which today is demonized and declared a deadly poison, so we wouldn't even think of experimenting with it. They turned us into maintenance staff. We are bio-robots, maintaining infrastructure whose purpose we don't even understand. We repair temples, thinking it's religion. We live in circuit cities, thinking they're just streets. We look at the sky and see airplane trails, not noticing that the sky is covered by a dome of lies. But the scariest thing isn't in the technologies. The scariest thing is that they changed us ourselves. Look at the sizes of doors in old buildings. The handles are at the level of your head. Stair steps that are inconvenient to climb. Ceiling heights of about 16 feet. This was built not for us. We are a diminished race. We are dwarves who settled in the houses of giants. Possibly the change in atmospheric pressure after the catastrophe led to a decrease in biological growth. Or maybe it's the result of genetic engineering by the new masters of the world, those who rewrote history and brought us to our knees.